All right, good morning, everyone. It is a pleasure. I want to bring into the room another person from this project who's not here and who's up on the screen here, Christina Disney. She's on leave right now, and she's been a key person in this Xwulqw'selu Connections project. And I'll be speaking on her behalf for now, but we'll just kind of bring her into the room and she will be at future meetings. So this morning, we have two key messages for everyone in the room and everyone online. The first is that we are a funded, independent, and collaborative research project with established partnerships with authority holders, strong community connections, and ongoing projects in the watershed. And this morning and moving forward, we hope to engage with the water sustainability planning process, or we'll call it WSP here, because most people in this room are WSP jargon people. You'll probably be very comfortable with that, to support evidence-based decision-making using community-based monitoring, participatory modeling, and community science facilitation. So this morning, for the next hour or so, we're going to be talking first about what is our why, what's driving our research. We're going to introduce you to our connections. There's many connections in the room and online, and we want to show you how we're connected to these things, and a little bit of our origin story, if you want to say, our commitments, our goals, our beginnings. And then we're going to deep dive into our 5 projects and our progress and our offers to the WSP. So first, why? Since we're all here, and there's obviously some reason why you came here and came online. But I think fundamentally, we are motivated to do research that supports the WSP to fill scientific gaps and to address community concerns. And this comes from this is just a sampling of previous work. There's been so much amazing work that has gone on in this watershed and is going on. And so really we feel like we're kind of on the shoulders of other people doing work and trying to contribute in building up the knowledge base and the community kind of engagement here in the watershed. So a few years ago, Oliver and Deb wrote an excellent report kind of laying out a framework for water sustainability plans. They described that essential components of a WSP would include data inputs, hydrologic and land use planning, and environmental flows. More recently, the kind of the end and fruition of the steering or initial scoping committee was this report, Xwulqw'selu Water Sustainability Plan Scoping Project, which proposed and suggested a holistic perspective on this WSP that included technical recommendations, some of which we've started already around water balance modeling, better understanding of forestry impacts, etc. Also last year, an excellent project led by Geomorphic Consulting developed environmental flow standards for the watershed, but they really focused on the lower main stem of the watershed with no work in the upper watershed or the tributaries. And then 3 other reports that in the last few years that we build on are the Hatfield report that was really detailed hydrologic work on that recommended against stream flow monitoring, which we've been doing in tributary drainages, determining the relative importance of water uses in smaller sub areas and developing robust models. And we're going to talk about modeling later on. The second report that was kind of going on at the same time was this internal engagement report. And in that report, the community really spoke really clearly about the need for transparent, accountable data processes behind water management decision-making. And finally, another report with similar timing, a little bit more recent, was water supply report, which again kind of highlighted the need for community engagement when evaluating water supply and storage options in the watershed. So that's the landscape, and that's the why of why we're here. And I started this with the word connection is almost kind of an annoyingly present in this. I'll just say connections a whole bunch of times. We've already said it a bunch of times in the room, but it's really fundamental to us. So we see that we connect 3 different things. The first is a hydrologic connection between groundwater and surface water. The second is you can call it hydrosocial connection, so connecting people with and in the watershed. And the third is a governance connection. So connecting water science with how water decisions are made. So we're guided from the start by rights holders and partners. So for our partners currently on this project are Cowichan Tribes, Ministry of Forests, Cowichan Watershed Board, Xwulqw'selu Watershed Working Group, and ourselves at the University of Victoria. But beyond those partners, we're actually quite broadly connected. So this is I'm not going to walk through every element of this diagram, but I just want to kind of draw your attention to the different elements. In the center of this working group of involved advisors. On the top right is in university jargon called highly qualified personnel. These are people that are being trained and part of this project, being funded by this project. So there are 2 PhD students and 2 community researchers. We have academic collaborators. We have at the top rights holders and partners. And I guess an important question of the morning and ongoing work is, how does the new ministry, which didn't exist, quite frankly, when we started this work, how does this fit in? And can it be a partner in this work? We also have other connections with other local stakeholders, advisors, and implementers, and provincial and national implementers. So when we kind of think about our research, we kind of think of 3 main things. And these are 3 kind of approaches that we've heard time and time again in community and in talking to our partners. The first is the importance of a whole of watershed approach. So this includes all of the watershed geographically, but also all of the watershed communities and ecosystems and beings in the watershed. The second approach that we keep throughout all of our work is we've kind of started calling a whole of science approach, where it's not just hydrologic science, we're taking a community-based and participatory watershed science that integrates hydrologic science, physical science with social science and community-based work. The last thing that I've talked about many times in many different meetings is that we are collaborative yet independent. So we want to kind of skate this line of working together, yet while still seeing value, both from our academic purposes, as well as from the decision-making and planning purposes of keeping some independence. So I think this is some of the nuance that we want to get into later in the morning and as we move forward. So those are 3 kind of overall approaches that we kind of come to kind of week after week, meeting after meeting internally, and as we do our work. There's a lot of text on these next 2 slides, so I just want to highlight that, and I want to kind of zoom our attention into a few different things. These are our research goals, the 3 research goals that we developed for this funded research project. I should have mentioned earlier probably that this is a 5-year NSERC funded research project. And so these were the goals that we wrote in there a year and a half ago or so as a group of partners applying for this grant. So the first is more the hydrologic one, to improve our understanding of current and future low flows in the Xwulqw'selu through community engaged monitoring and modeling. The second is really about community engagement, around to deepen community engagement with water science and watershed governance. And the third is about the governance. So to clarify the role and value of community science, monitoring and modeling in improving water governance and shared management between Indigenous and settler governments. And those were in the NSERC proposal, but more recently as a research team, this fall, we've been really thinking deeply and discussing lots about what we want our social impact goals to be. So we've written these 5 social impact goals. The 2 highlighted in purple here, we think are the most important for this morning to think about and most related to the water sustainability planning process. So I'll just read just those 2. That rights holders, stakeholders, and residents deeply understand the watershed science of Xwulqw'selu, and water and land decisions, read the water sustainability plan and other things, about the Xwulqw'selu use community-based monitoring and modeling results. So those research goals and those social impact goals are the 2 things that we kind of have in our sights over the next 5 years or so. And that's what is kind of driving us. And so I wanted to shift now to some of kind of our origin story and kind of what our kind of guidance. So we do have a long-term commitment to the watershed and to the water sustainability planning process. We started in the dark, socially isolated days of the pandemic. I found this slide or this image as I was moving through. So Jessica and Tom Rutherford in the room here, Larry, who was on earlier, David Slade, and a former postdoc, Chinchu Mohan, all socially distanced in 2020 during our first pilot. Jill was there as well later in that day, just not in this photo. Oh, you maybe took the photo. Perfect. Thank you, Jill. So I wanted to put this in here because it kind of reminded us of where we started, but also that a lot of the same people have been there for the whole time. So I just wanted to, I guess, appreciate that as well. And so now we have funding currently to 2026, and we put this 2026 and beyond in here for a reason. So the funding of the project ends in 2026, which is still a long way off, but we do have an intention to stay engaged beyond that. So what we've been up to in the interim, in between the 2020 and 2026, is in 2021, we wrote a rather large and complicated proposal to NSERC, got it funded. Christina started her PhD and completed her first full field season with a series of monitoring volunteers in the watershed. And then in 2022, we hired David started his PhD. We had community researchers, Ella and Jennifer started a lot of team building, a second field season. And here we are kind of at the cusp of 2023 and kind of asking, how do we engage more deeply with the water sustainability planning process? I think we've been reporting out and loosely engaged so far, but we want to kind of deepen that if we can. I wanted to also, another kind of very texty slide, and I apologize for that, but the text is important in this case, and that's why I wanted to put it in there. So we do have a signed memorandum of understanding that has been signed between the university, Cowichan Tribes, Cowichan Watershed Board, and the Cowichan Station Area Association, as well as a letter of support from what is now the Ministry of Forests. And I just want to give people a moment to actually just read what's on here. So I'll stop speaking for a second, and I want you to read what these parties have agreed to. So that's what we kind of decided upon collectively. I know there's been a lot of different people moving in and out of the room and into the process, but I wanted to kind of come back to this where we started with a formal memorandum of understanding, and in kind of those are kind of the guiding principles of the memorandum of understanding. But more, and when we dig into the weeds of that, we really see that we were trying to implement, and I think we are still trying to implement, what I would call, from my perspective at least, I'm happy to hear other opinions, but some of the best practices for community science in the UNDRIP era. So specifically in the Memorandum of Understanding, we have integrated the OCAP principles. So these are ownership, control, access, and possession of data. So the data is owned in this process, or in this project, by Cowichan Tribes. We are the steward of data. And we have data licenses that respect and integrate that. We're also in the Memorandum of Understanding, we have got the agreement to open the data whenever possible. So open science is an important element that's evolved in scientific work recently. And so we are also applying these FAIR principles of findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. So this is open data that respects First Nations ownership of that data. We have also continued to build relationships with stakeholders and residents over the last few years, specifically with Mosaic Forest Management, In the last year, I worked hard to work with them on developing and signing a research permit to allow us to openly share the data from the upper watershed. And last summer, we were involved in collaboration with a lot of their support for monitoring in the upper watershed. We've also continued to develop relationships with dozens of residents, including farmers. This is one of the training sessions, again, with Christina on the banks of the river. So we do have 5 different projects. 3 of them are actively working right now, and I want to give highlights of those, and then I'm going to describe Christina's project a little bit for her. So the 5 projects are community watershed monitoring, participatory modeling, facilitating community science, highlighting the value of community science, and reporting on community science and statutory decision-making. So the first project has been being led by Christina Disney, and I'm going to speak about that in a minute. Second project, and David will come up after that, is to talk about participatory modeling. And the third project is really being led by Ella Martindale and Jennifer Shepard, the 2 community researchers. And the fourth project will be led by Jennifer as well, around engagement, evaluation, and learning, and she will describe that a little bit more. And the fifth project is really still in the gestation period, I guess I would say. It'll start in probably a couple of years' time, and will be led by Deb Curran for the Environmental Law Center to report more broadly on the role of community science and statutory decision-making and co-governance between Indigenous and settler governments. So Christina has been very active and busy in the field for the last couple summers. This is the first 2 years of her PhD project, and she has been leading and facilitating and working with dozens of people in the watershed for monitoring of low flows in all the tributaries. Since I am a scientist, I thought I should put at least one graph in the presentation. This is a graph of flows through time. This is stream flow through time. And we focus on what everyone cares about, which is the low flows. So we are out there monitoring, and the community volunteers are out there monitoring in August and September. And we've gathered a massive amount of data over the last couple summers. So this is, again, I'm a scientist, so I thought I should show you some data. But we're monitoring across the whole of the watershed. Christina was tramping around, measuring stream flow every second week at over a dozen tributaries as they came into the Xwulqw'selu main stem. And we developed understanding of where and when stream flow. And so stream flow here is in cubic meters per second. And the red is the percentage of that tributary's contribution to the stream flow of the main stem of the Xwulqw'selu River at that time. And so I just wanted to emphasize here, I'm not going to walk through all the details. I'm going to show you the main highlights of the observations and interpretations that we have. But I just wanted to show you that we're collecting data across the whole watershed, as are the volunteers. So we have an open source app. Again, this data is owned by Cowichan tribes. Monitors are out with these temperature and conductivity pens, making observations in the tributaries weekly over the low flow season. So our highlights from this monitoring work are first, this is from the first field season in 2021, that knowledge holder Tim Kolchinsky reminded us, and this has almost become a mantra for us, that tributaries may look like ditches, but ditches are not ditches. That's our mantra. They can and often are salmon, salmon-bearing streams. Second kind of key highlight from the first field season was we observed, and we saw this again in 2022, that important tributary creeks of the Xwulqw'selu run dry during the summer. And these dry creeks reveal where groundwater is not directly connected to streams, whereas the others that remain flowing through the summer reveal where the more resilient tributaries are to drought conditions. The third thing that we really took away from the first season and the second field season is just as true, is that people in this watershed care. We've all observed that. It's amazing. There's so many dedicated, interested people. I think this project has really got even higher levels of engagement. I think Jill will speak to that as well a little bit later, around the connections between community and how people understand and see water in the watershed where they live. Three more highlights from the 2022 field season. This is where we moved up into the upper watershed and started monitoring in the lands, the forested lands owned by Mosaic. The upper watershed contributes 80 to 90% of the stream flow of the Xwulqw'selu in the dry summer season. This is very important volumetrically. We also saw, as we were monitoring through the whole watershed, that specific tributaries contribute more to the stream flow of the main stem than expected based on their drainage area. So there's kind of important contributions that we didn't expect. And again, that the community was highly engaged. They made more than 700 observations by over 25 active volunteers that are helping us develop a better understanding of the water flows in various tributaries. So in each of these projects, we're going to kind of end with what we think how the water sustainability plan could benefit from these different projects. So the first, for this community watershed monitoring, we think that this monitoring will allow you to access reliable data on flows and the persistence in all the major tributaries, improve the understanding of groundwater surface water interactions across the whole watershed, prioritize locations of interventions and identify data gaps, and build community connections. And what I think Jill maybe or someone else earlier at the end of the field season called Watershed IQ, which I thought was a cool term. So the bottom line is we think this can save time to access data sooner, save money to avoid duplication of efforts, and build public trust by using local evidence to make informed decisions. I want to hand it over to David. Do you want to come in here? And David is going to take over to describe the efforts around participatory modeling.
Thank you, Tom. Yes, so we are going to talk about the second project. We haven't talked too much before. So what we want to explain here a little bit is some of the definition. For example, what is a model? We are going to talk a little bit about the hydrological cycle. We will explain what are the drivers, and by drivers, I mean something that leads to an outcome. So, for example, the driver of a car is the one who takes the decision where is the car going, right? So the driver of the watershed could be, for example, the climate can change the low flow. So this is a driver also because it's modifying the low flows. And we are going to talk about some of the limitations and some of the benefits related of modeling with the water sustainability plan. So the key messages here are we can understand the past, the present, and the future of these drivers that are three. I'm going to talk about three drivers that I'm going to explain in few minutes that can change the watershed. And then with models, we can try different ideas that can prevent or modify the future of the watershed and support when you are taking some decisions. Also, it is important for the water sustainability plan, and I think that modeling has some limitations. Model that we know about this could be sensitive for some groups, and there are some implications, political implications involved in that also. So this is the proposed approach that we have, and we have the current situation now. We have the participatory modeling. We have 6 different evaluating options for now, and we also have the desired outcome. So there are 3 different things that we could find. Of course, the best one is the first one, a healthy river and community. The next one is a healthier river and community. So it's like in the middle, and the other one is a degraded river and community challenges. So, for example, what we have in the evaluations options, if we say, for example, forever farming, it means we are going to make some strategies that help to the farming, and in a good way for everyone also. Like, for example, ecological restoration is another option. So these are like extreme options. We could say that at the end, maybe we want to combine some of them to make a different option. Then here we have in the River Day, we were explaining one model. This is a groundwater model. And on that day, there were many kids that want to play with that. But what is useful about this is a physical model. You can see here how the water move to different levels of the aquifer, and we can understand how the computational work is done, we could say. So of course we cannot build physical models all the time because it's gonna be expensive. So that's what we can do computationally, and we will run thousands of models with one, let's say one model that is the one that will be modified many times. So what is a model? And I can ask you a question here if someone wants to say what do you think is a model? And this definition will be for these three images will be fit. If you can fit one definition, someone can say something, what they think, what do you think is a model?
That's a question you want to hear.
Yeah, if someone wants to say something, what is a model? Yeah, if in 10 seconds no one say anything, then I will continue. Yeah. Okay, so it's fine. A model is a representation of the reality. It's a representation of the reality. It's a representation of the best outfit that you can wear. It's a representation of how the house will look like in the architecture, or it's a representation of how the watershed is, right? So in this case, when we're talking about participatory modeling, we see in this figure that there are some people that they have a gathering, and they probably are from different areas. One people more related with the ventilation, with the air, another with the illumination of the lights, and probably another with the space. And then they are working together for this model so that the output could be better. So we imagine something like that when we talk about participatory model for the watershed. And something that is important to say is that all models are wrong, but some are useful. So we are not going to provide a single answer to the problems, but we are going to give a range of different possibilities. And that's what we call sensitivity analysis. We have different outputs according to the inputs that we are changing, let's say the parameters. And here we have our modeling goal. This is a representation. In the left, we have the reality. How complex is the landscape? You can see some part agriculture, some part there are forestry logging, there are houses, there are, different things. And then we simplify this, like for visualization of this in the right, then you have some of these things there. We have the catchment like in a cross section from the bottom to the upper part. And then we need to make this model useful. And how we want to make this model useful, we will talk about this a little bit. This is some changes in the land use that has been happening between the last 20 years. This is from Google Earth from 1984 to 2020. As you can see here, there has been some changes mainly, or the biggest changes that you see there is related with logging. And you will see that in some years, there are really big changes, and we want to quantify and to think about how this could modify the log flows, and if this increase, decrease, when decrease, right? And so we have here, we know that we are not including the people itself in the modeling, like we are not modeling the people because that is something very difficult and we don't want to say that we know what the people is thinking. But on the other hand, we are implicitly thinking or including how the people is using the water and how they are using the land. So we are implicitly including that. And here we have the water cycle, the hydrological cycle, and here we start from the precipitation. We could start from left to right. From the precipitation, then we include some of the climate variables like temperature, like humidity. Then the water is going to go to the ground. In the ground, we will have the recharge to the aquifers. And then in the aquifers, we will have some interactions between the groundwater and the surface or a stream flow. And then there are other things that are going through the watershed, that is the groundwater extractions, mainly for agriculture and for human use. And then we have also the evapotranspiration that is pretty much related with the trees. And this is like a cycle, no? So we have SWOT mode flow, like one tool that is free we want to use to build a water budget model and to see all of these processes. So now I was talking about 3 drivers at the beginning, and the 3 drivers are land use, water use, and climate change. So how do we get these drivers? That are some of the drivers that has been reported in the reports that Tom was explaining at the beginning. And here, what we have here is some of the representation of the data that we need to build the model, right? Land use, topography, soil precipitation, which include climate also. And here we have some of the output. As you can see, there is something moving in the right. So we want to compare these. These are the flows. We are going to see this later. We want to compare this with data that is taken by the government and by the community. So the project that Christina also is working there. And this is very similar to a heartbeat. As you can see, the shape of the Xwulqw'selu is also like a heart. And these are like the arteries. So the river is representing here different flows. This is some preliminary results, something that we could do. And here we have the lowest part is 0 to 2 meters cubic per second, and the highest flows are 17 to 39 to 37. So after this, what we could say, we have some the desired outcome. We want a healthy river and healthy community, or a good community. No challenges, we could say, or challenges that you can handle. And then what we are thinking is, if the Cowichan tribes agree, we want to talk about 4 main things. We want to talk about environmental flow. We want to talk about the quantity of mature forests, the tributaries that are restored, and restore, I mean, talking a little bit about the sinuosity of the river, because you know that in the report of Jeff, they were talking about the river degradation is when they lose the shape and they are straight, and then you have more problems with flows, right? Something like that. And if something that we could say is cultural sites with intact flows and forests, like in percentage, which places are like, yeah, are better conserved, or which places need more conservation. Yeah, and here we have comparison between a wet year and a dry year in 2015 and 2019. As you can see, in 2015, in summer, we have more red places, which is 3 liters per second, right? And in 2019, we have less places, which it was some years. It's not only 1 year pattern, but there are patterns between many years, right? So years that are harder than other years. And here we have a representation of the discharge 20 years discharge from 90 to 2010, 12, the observation and the simulation. So what we want to see here is how we are fitting with the low flows, which is the part that we are mainly doing research. So this is good, we can say. Here we have some examples. I'm gonna take 3 minutes more or less. And one of these examples is in Wisconsin, and another example is in New England. So what we can see here is that different scenarios, accelerated innovation, abandonment, and renewal, has different outputs in the future of the watershed. And in the other hand, we have growing global, Yankee cosmopolitan, well, different kind of scenarios that will lead at different futures. So here, for example, for Wisconsin, we have the relation between the narrative, what they call the narrative, and the models, and this has some implication in the land use. And you can see some of these lands, you have more urban, which is red, and some of them you have more green, which is forest, and this has some implication in the quantity of the water. Here in this part of New England, this is the other example, we have the average annual maximum daily flow. So what does it mean? It's a quantity of water. We are considering, or they are considering the climate, the changing in climate. And as you can see, some of these oceans are represented in a range of flow, and some of them are better than other ones. Some of them has more impervious area, some more construction, and some of them has less construction. So what we want to do with this is to help to some of the things that they have been reporting that you lack in the watershed. So for example, what is the recharge dynamic? How is the water budget of the watershed? How is the connection between the groundwater and the surface water, right? And there are other things that we cannot specify here, but we are working, including all this information, good say. So just to finish here, we need to think what could be the benefit of this modeling for the water sustainability plan. And some of the things that we have here is we can be more creative about streams. So you can say, what will happen if we have agriculture in the whole watershed? And it doesn't have any cost, it doesn't have any impact, because we can model it and see what will happen. Or what will happen if we have everything forestry, or like that. We can provide some evidence to reduce the risk, and in decision making that is very useful. We can help to understand the reality and the past, and we can plan for the future. So we will have some evaluating options that we can have. So with this, I would like to thank you and leave for the next project.
And we're just gonna move over to Ella, who's gonna talk about project 3.
Ready when you have me pinned. Are you ready? Okay. Great. So thanks, Tom and David. I'm going to talk about project 3. Oh, I hear a bit of an echo, but maybe that's okay. I think it's okay.
It's fine in the room here. Yeah.
Okay, as long as it's fine in the room.
Yeah.
You just let me know if you need anything else. So as Tom was saying at the beginning in the introduction, project 3 is about community science. And my job and Jennifer's job relate directly to this project as community researchers. And so what we've been up to this past season as part of our team building and part of facilitating that community science aspect of both the community modeling and the modeling projects is inviting and supporting volunteer monitors, which we did successfully this last summer, developing a database of local organizations and change makers. So a lot of what Jennifer's been doing and making connections in community and talking with the team about who we're already connected to has been in support of that kind of development of the database. We participate in community, and I've been away. So it's, again, mostly Jennifer who's doing a lot of this community connection making. We have been working internally to clarify roles and commitments to our partners, and of commitments of the partners as well. So various meetings, and that's ongoing, and that's kind of what this is about as well, in part. We've organized some community events, such as the barbecue that we had, I guess it was anyway, this past summer. We had a community barbecue to congratulate the volunteers and also move forward in a good way. We have been working internally as part of this team building exercise or work that we've been doing, not just exercise, to support projects 1 and 2. Again, like I said, the community monitoring and modeling. And we're looking to work on our communications, work on reporting out, and work on connecting to all of you in the room and others who are outside of the room, to talk about what we're learning and talk about this kind, like the stuff that we're presenting here today, and like how we can share that more broadly with community on various levels. Great, so this, correct me if I'm wrong, this must have been the barbecue.
Yeah,
and it was,
with
I
the
think,
salmon.
Yeah, it was in July, or I'm like
June. Yeah,
completely out of it now. But we're all there together. It was really, really lovely. So that was a big part of what Jennifer and I had been working on, not only just like the practical aspects of what this barbecue was and connecting with folks who had already been doing this work over 2020 and 2021. And then, yeah, like moving forward in a good way. And then what other slide do we have? Oh, and here's the other one. So we hosted the Bright Angel site of the 2022 Cowichan Station, and that was really cool. And you can see Tom playing with and working with a model that we made of the Xwulqw'selu Connections for children and everybody to ask questions about. And I think it was really productive and a really good day. And there was other various vendors. I'm sure some of you were there, and if you weren't, wish you were. Anyways, it was really lovely as well. So some of the things that and Jennifer did like a huge, she did a lot of that planning with the Cowichan Station group. So it was really good to connect with them in that way. Great. So how could the water sustainability plan benefit from facilitating community science? So enjoy the strong connections with dozens of dedicated volunteers and other community members that we already do have and that we're committed to in this project, like moving forward with. Access a database of local organizations and change makers. So like the connections we've made, they're transparent, and we're working all together on this. Gain insight generally into ways to engage well with community locally. And if I could take a minute to talk about my role moving forward here. So as I said in my intro earlier, I am in Toronto. I'm doing a PhD at OISE with Dr. Eve Tuck, and I study Indigenous research methodologies and place-based education. And so this year I've been working hard with the team to do a lot of internal work and thinking about Indigenous methodologies. What is community science? Like how can this kind of academic project really meaningfully connect with community? That's really important to my own work. And so we're like thinking forward and thinking about what this kind of, what we can do as a project in terms of community science. And so for me as a Cowichan Mustima, like I'm really, really engaged and like always will be with even far away with this particular like with my territory. And so it's really important for me to be here and working on the Xwulqw'selu Connections for my own work and also for the benefit of community and Cowichan community members broadly, and those who would like to be back on the water continuously. So those kinds of things are what we're talking about internally and also externally here with you today, and moving forward, thinking about what Project 3 can look like to really make that a robust and necessary part of the full picture, like to support projects 1 and 2 and 4 and 5 moving forward. So I'm super committed to being here to do that kind of work. And so I thought I'd properly introduce myself in that way in the context of the project. Heichka, I will hand it over to, I think, Jennifer.
Thank you, Ella.
Okay. Thank you, Ella, for those words and sharing the great work that we're doing together. I know you keep speaking about my work, but it's really, really valuable that we have the chance to work with you and all the perspective and words that you bring in such a good way to this project. So we're just going to shift gears now a little bit to a project that we haven't actually started to work all that much on yet. Tom was showing you a bit of a continuum of our involvement and how we've gotten to here. And project 4, we're just starting to do some early thinking now under what that might actually look like. And this isn't something for us to do exclusively and say, here's how it's going to go. This is something that we're going to do again with our approach with community members and with our partners, and hopefully with you as well with the water sustainability planning process. So thank you for that little adjustment. And so this project 4 is around that engagement, looking at what kind of impact are we having? Are we having the sorts of impact that we were intending to? And then we can pivot along the way, right? Rather than waiting till the project's done and go, now what have we accomplished? Let's look at what we're doing as we go and continue to pivot and learn. And that's part of what this project is focusing on. So Ella took a moment to speak about her role, and I can speak a little bit more about mine. Certainly going to be continuing in this role, facilitating the community engaged science work, and then also adding in this as part of my work moving forward. So it would be fantastic to engage with the Water Sustainability Planning Steering Committee and Planning Committee around the evaluation and learning, and to be the main liaison between the Xwulqw'selu Connections project and the WSP process. And then not only are we looking at evaluation about our own specific research goals and the social goals that Tom spoke about earlier, we also want to check in on the partnerships. Tom spoke about the Memorandum of Understanding at the beginning of this work, checking in on our accountabilities and what we'd agreed on with our partners in terms of their priorities and how are we doing in supporting each other and moving that work forward. And then looking much more broadly, non-locally, but taking the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples and the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, and what are we doing to actually advance those here locally. And I'm connected with a couple of communities of practice in Canada as well, to connect with folks in other watersheds and other completely different contexts to continue my learning around how do we move these goals forward in local contexts. So I'll be bringing in that sort of wisdom and connection with other folks working in these areas. And then also looking at communications and making sure that folks more broadly are learning through different channels of what makes sense for them about the work that we're doing. And that would include events that POLIS would be hosting and other forms of communication. Okay, so how could this project 4 around engagement, evaluation, and learning be useful to the water sustainability planning process? Well, as I was mentioning before, in terms of the work that we can do in the moment, real time, what is the value of this research, right? Don't wait until the end, but let's engage in reflection along the way and notice the power of this work and how this is supporting not just our research project, but the water sustainability planning process. As I mentioned, being in that ongoing liaison between the two projects, and also the communications piece about spreading the word about not just our work, but also the water sustainability planning process. We have those connections in community with broader groups beyond ourselves, and we can also share your good work through those channels and through those partner organizations and networks and communities. So speaking about engagement, there's lots of different levels and ways that we can be involved moving forward. The International Association of Public Participation has developed a continuum around 5 different levels of decision-making of the public in public related projects. And this is another piece that's come up from the work of Tremblay in 2017 that's adapting that to this spectrum of community engaged research. So we are just going to speak very lightly to this and maybe plant some seeds for you around thinking of to what degree of integration we want to have moving forward in decision making, in planning, in sharing information, and so on. So I'm just going to take you very lightly through this. We won't spend a lot of time in the theory. On the left-hand side of the scale, there's informing, right? So just basically providing information which helps you to better understand the problems and solutions. Pretty straightforward. Then consulting is then having a bit more of that engagement together. So asking for specific information from you, asking for some feedback that helps us with our thinking and development of alternatives and decisions. It doesn't necessarily mean that you're part of decision-making process, but it helps to inform our thinking, which then informs the work. Right? In the middle of the continuum is that involvement piece, and that's where there's a lot more exchange happening here. So working directly to ensure that community issues are understood and considered, and we can bring that perspective into the water sustainability plan work through our liaison, right? And also for us to learn more about what your concerns are and considerations are, right? So there's a lot more flow of information, thinking things through together, right? And then collaborating is even a little bit deeper there in terms of where the decision-making responsibility and accountability lies, right? So more than simply the conversations to inform our thinking, but actually deciding together, how is this work going to move forward, whether it's around your community engagement plan with the water sustainability planning process in our work. We can also bring in community members that could be more directly involved in particular, consulting roles that you might have. These are conversations that we may not have today, but just plant some seeds to think about that these are actual choices to make about how integrated we want to be. And then that last piece on the right around co-creating is there's lots of different ways that we can think about this, but we have to also think about what's happening beyond this project when it's complete. And Tom brought up 2026, and the long deep involvement we've had moving in, as well as what happens once this research project no longer has funding, right? So if we can start to think now as well about over the next few years, how do we make sure that this work is continually sustained and held with community and with the rights holders and authority holders? That's where that last piece comes in. And that might be creating some new bodies or entities, and we can support some thinking around that. So this is another way to kind of visualize that. Would you like to take that over from here, Tom? Okay.
So my middle name is Venn diagram. So I have to put multiple Venn diagrams into every presentation. So that's why this slide is here. But for me, it's just another way of visualizing this trajectory from kind of disparate and independent, informing and consulting to some degree of overlap to a large degree of overlap. And in our activities for the rest of the morning, we want to kind of dig into this basically, but we were suggested to actually state our needs and our goals and how this all aligns. So we started with our research and social impact goals. And to meet those research and social impact goals, we think we want to be somewhere in the middle of this diagram, ideally. Our minimum needs might be somewhere in the inform or consult area. But what we actually really would like, and our preference, is to be connected and involved in the meaning of this slide here with the water sustainability planning team and our project. So what some of this could look like is regular meetings and workshops, a project representative to water sustainability planning meetings, and information and data sharing goals and practices. If we want to kind of dig even deeper and get even more engaged, we can think about what collaboration and co-creation can look like or could look like, where we partner with the WSP or the authority holders of the WSP on each phase of the research, including, and this would be bringing the decision-making and analysis more to the front, or kind of a real end member of what co-creating could look like. And we internally have thought through what this kind of spectrum of reciprocity and engagement looks like for each of the first 3 projects. And those are shared in the slides, but we didn't want to kind of walk through those in detail just for the sake of time. But we just really wanted to end with where we want the morning to end. Not that we're ending right now, but we're kind of looking into the future. We want to talk about this spectrum of engagement, but we also, and I appreciated a few people said they're bringing to the room some practical next steps and stuff. I would love to kind of near the end of the morning get to what the next steps are over the next few months.